Welcome to Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority, the lively and engaging podcast for business professionals who've always believed they have a book in them. I'm your host, Jillian Whitney. Join me as I chat with authors and industry experts from all around the world to explore simple strategies to write, publish, and leverage your business book. Whether you're an entrepreneur, executive, or an employee, this podcast is for you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. And we have Claire E. Jones in the house today. And we're going to be talking about some really interesting stuff, the sort of the blending of author, speaker, and how it can all go together. Claire and I recently met each other and we got to know each other. And I got so excited. I said, you must come on my show. So she is here. So before we get stuck in with our topic, Claire, can you please go ahead and let people know who you are and what you do?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Claire E. Jones. I'm an author, speaker, and mentor. I write both fiction and nonfiction, and I help other writers navigate the overly convoluted publishing space.
Absolutely. And it's, not for the faint of heart. A lot of people just kind of go, how hard can it be? It's not necessarily that it's hard. There's just a lot that you don't know until you kind of get into the thick of it. And, that's why some hand-holding always works quite nicely. And having people that can, share their tips as you go along helps too. So Claire, you have a lot of hats. I have to admit, you wear a lot of hats. Mm-hmm. And so I just, so speaker, writer, author, writer, podcaster, like publisher, it goes on and on and on. So with so many hats, I just have to ask you, is there a favorite one out of all the roles you play? Which is sort of your favorite?
It's hard to choose, honestly. Most writers just want to write all day. That's where we find the most flow in our work, right? Those dopamine hits of being lost in the creative flow is very addicting. And so sometimes I'm in the mood to just sit down in a chair, cuddle up for a few weeks and not talk to anyone ever again. But then I go to events in person and I'm like, oh my God, my people, I get to nerd out with you. I get to connect with you. And, the high is just as rewarding when I'm doing that work as when I'm, writing by myself in my little silo.
I love that. I love that. And you gave me a perfect segue into what I wanted to focus the majority of our talk today, but we'll of course go off on other tangents as well. But one of the things you said, that keyword, which was events. And when I first met you and we started talking, Claire, that was something that was just like ding, ding, ding. I just love that because the hard part of writing a book is the marketing. And so we have to always have our marketing. Speaking of hats, we always have to have our marketing hat on. And speaking is a great way to create visibility for your book and visibility for your services and who you are and an author and all that sort of stuff. So you have a very unique ability that you have spoken at many, many events. I went to your website and was like, oh my gosh, look at all these different things that you've done. And so one of the things you shared with me is about being a panel speaker at events. And, we always kind of think like, oh, I want to be the keynote speaker. And if I'm not the keynote speaker, I'll just go there and sit in the audience. But being a panel is kind of like that baby step to getting on events. So let's start off with that, Claire. How did you even start being a panel speaker at events? Because you're a master at it.
It's funny because I think I actually started the other way around, where I did start in the more keynote speaker space, but that was with smaller audiences. And so as I was creating a strategy for my speaking progression development over the course of this publishing career that I'm building at the moment, I realized that I wanted to get on bigger stages in front of bigger audiences. And so that's when I started researching cons and conferences and conventions, because previous to that, I was doing small localized networking group kind of speaking. And I knew I just wanted to get on progressively bigger stages to advance my speaking career. And so being a panelist is a great way to insert your foot into those larger spaces. And you do have to have some sort of speaking experience to qualify for those bigger speaking stages. And so my experience with the smaller networking groups, the smaller audiences, and the podcasting definitely qualified me to then be on panels at these larger conventions and conferences.
I love that. I love that. And I like how you defined that it's like you can be the keynote in for a small audience, which is like it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have that speaking experience, but are you really getting the bang for your buck in
Mm,
terms of, your visibility and credibility? Whereas if you are on a panel and it's a larger audience, but you have a smaller role, you're also leveraging the other people on the panel as
yes.
well.
Yeah.
So it's very strategic and very savvy. So kind of okay. So how did you make that transition? How did you kind of get your first like panel gig?
It's basically submitting on their websites. Like, I look for conferences and conventions that are aligned with my genre, with my values, with my topics. They're the types of networking spaces and event spaces that I want to make sure that my name brand is aligned with. And there has to be that sort of alignment between branding for both the events that you're speaking with and your own personal brand too, as an author. And so I think the first panel event that I did was for Geek Girl Con, which is a convention in Seattle that focuses on getting women and girls more into STEM and geeky types of endeavors. And they do a lot of talks on inclusivity is one of their biggest pushes, and I talk a lot about inclusivity as well. And so it seemed like a natural fit for me to go for that route. And so I basically just submitted on their website when they were looking for speaker applications. And that's when I got invited to do a panel on how small presses are looking for more diversified voices in the authors that they choose to pick up in their publishing business.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. And I saw too, like I noticed, and you actually mentioned it, but I had seen it on your website and I saw Glasgow and it was just
Mm.
like, "Oh my gosh, did you get to go to Glasgow?" And you said, "No, but it was virtual." So
Yeah.
can you talk about that one? Because that's like even breaking out of your country and
Yeah.
going abroad, even virtually counts.
Absolutely. So my experience at Geek Girl Con qualified me for Worldcon. And that's the Glasgow Worldcon that you're referring to. Worldcon is the yearly convention for the World Science Fiction Society, and they are in charge of awarding the Hugo Awards every year, which is a major award in the science fiction and fantasy space for both books and TV shows, video games, those types of awards. And so I know that I want to aim for a Hugo Award at some point in my writing career. And so being part of Worldcon programming is one of those first steps to put myself in the right rooms for that to happen. And so when I first learned about Worldcon, it was actually when they were having it in China back in, I think that was 2023 that it was in China. And I just didn't really get my act in time to make that happen. And so the next year when it was happening in Glasgow, I was like, all right, I'm really going to make an effort to get my ducks in a row. And so I submitted via their website and I got selected for 2 or 3 panels, and I was in the process. My passport had expired, And so I was in the process of trying to renew my passport in time to make it to the Glasgow Worldcon, but the timing didn't work out. And so about a few weeks before the actual event, I had to tell the organizers that I was unable to actually make it in person. And they were like, don't worry, we actually are offering virtual participation for this particular Worldcon. So I even moderated a panel virtually. One of my panels I was the moderator for. And the timing was ridiculous because that meant that I was moderating a panel at 2 a.m. my time. But I made it work. I went to bed at 5. I slept for 5 hours. I woke up, I got dressed, I did my panel, and then I went back to sleep.
I love that. I love that. And you know what? It shows that you're flexible. And, I used to live on the West Coast, so I know Pacific time, you're always behind the rest of the world. It's just awful.
Yeah.
And so, that's really good that you could just say, you know what? I can, like, sleep is overrated. We're going to sleep when we die. So it's just like, yes, take these opportunities. And I love that you also, first of all, I love that they had that flexibility and they worked with you and that worked out. But then you just added in another thing that was like, ding, ding, ding. Don't let her go with that, Jillian. Make sure you talk about that. Being a moderator for a panel as well. So where does that come in? Is that just once you have experience being a panel speaker, you can move on to that? How does that work?
Yeah, usually when you are submitting on forms to be a speaker at a certain event, they ask whether you are willing to be a moderator for one of the events that you are eventually chosen for. And so I always say, like, if I'm very familiar with the topic, then I'm like, yes, I will be a moderator if you need me to be the moderator for that particular talk. And so I think they look at past speaking experience to make sure that you are qualified enough to be a successful moderator for that. And then they assign based on who's interested in being a moderator. And so I was moderator for one event at the Glasgow Worldcon last year. And then this year, the Worldcon actually happened in Seattle, which is where I live. And I was chosen for 7 events this year. And I was a moderator for 3 out of the 7.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank goodness it was in your hometown because
I got to sleep in my own bed. It was wonderful.
yes, I could imagine that. I could imagine that. So when you're a panel speaker, how do you prepare for that? Because it's like if you give a keynote, you know what you're going to talk about. You do your slides, you practice and this and that. How do you prep to be on a panel?
Ideally, the prep is led by the moderator, whoever the moderator is. So in the ideal circumstances, the moderator will reach out to their panelists in a timely manner ahead of the event. And ideally, they provide you with a list of questions that they plan on asking during the panel. However, not all moderators do that. So it is kind of, you have to be prepared for anything, honestly. And so just make sure that you come with your own personal talking points. If you are provided a list of questions, make sure that you do have pre-thought out answers to those questions. But yeah, it's kind of a, improv situation sometimes.
I can imagine. And also I could imagine sometimes it could be awkward, especially if you're an introvert like me, that you're just like, well, how do I get seen? Because like if I was on a panel with like 3 other people or 6 other people or whatever, it's like there could be that guy, could be a gal,
Yeah.
right? We don't mean just men, women, anything, whatever. There could be that person who's kind of like the panel hog. They get on and they're blowhards and just go on. So how do you kind of nudge like pick me?
It's a fine balance. You really have to. I think this is true of all speaking careers, is that you do have to work on your skills of diplomacy and etiquette. And some people have that skill developed and some people do not. And so ideally, this is also managed by the moderator in the room as well. There, for the Worldcon, for example, they do give speaker guidelines ahead of time where they're like, try to only speak for 2 minutes at a time. Don't use this as a platform for like excessive self-promotion. and so they do give some rules of order ahead of time. But as you get more experience in a speaking career, you kind of have to create those rules of etiquette for yourself as you go as well.
Got it. Got it. No, that totally makes sense. And, I think the more we can kind of, you're basically, I think there is a lot of homework in terms of, you don't want to be on a panel tomorrow. It's like you have to back into it. It's like, I want to be on a panel next year. So what do I need to do? And how do I connect with those people, in advance? And then knowing what you're going to talk about. I like that you said you get your talking points and even maybe sometimes our body language. Like, I
Yes.
think we can let the moderator know, oh, I got a lot to say on that one. I
Yes.
think they can see it like, oh, you stop bouncing up in your seat, Jillian. We'll give you a chance to talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that helps. Even smiling, can do so much as
Yes.
well. So
Yes.
I want to ask you, so you get on a panel. Now it's over. The event is over. First of all, I'm going to actually make this two-parters. What do you do after you speak in the time period that you're in the conference? Not because I also want to ask you later too, but it's like, okay, so here you are, you're in Seattle, you're doing all, these 7 different things. So then what are you doing strategically? Do you just go and then sit in the audience? Or are you meeting people? What's your strategy to kind of leverage this in the real time?
Yeah. I think this question goes back to that prep question too, is like when I do go to speaking engagements and I am on panels, I also bring with me a certain amount of materials too. So because I'm an author, I actually have a business card in the form of a bookmark. That's how I have my business card. And so I make sure that I have plenty of bookmarks to hand out at the event. I always come with a thick stack of bookmarks ready to go. And if I have any free handouts that I've already prepared that are relevant to the particular topic that I'm speaking on, I will also bring a stack of those handouts, and I will bring physical copies of my books as well. And so most panelists, if you are in an author space, will bring copies of their book and like prop the books in front of them as they are speaking on the panel. And so while I'm speaking on the panel, I have my books in front of me, and then I kind of like fan out my bookmarks on the table in front of my books. And so right immediately after the panel ends, there's usually a bit of buffer time before the next event starts, usually 10 to 15 minutes. And that's when individual members of the audience will come up to the panelists' table and ask you more questions that maybe didn't get answered during the Q&A session, or they might come up and grab your bookmark, or they might come up and touch your book and look through your book. And so you kind of have to give them both tactile as well as informational things that they can interact with. And so it is, smiling, nodding, being friendly. I sit at the table for a good 8 minutes. I usually keep an eye on the event organizers, like how fast are they flipping the room for the next event that's occurring, that kind of stuff. And if I create a really good conversation with either an audience member or a fellow panelist in that kind of post period, then I will walk and talk with them as we leave the room. And so that presents another opportunity for continued conversation, continued connection. And that's often where we get to, organize a more long-term relationship after that initial introduction of the speaking event. And so that's like the short-term post.
Right.
Long-term post event, there's usually some sort of like, if the moderator does email the panelists ahead of the event, you already have a list of the other panelists' emails. And so I always follow up with those other panelists. And I'm like, it was great to be with you on a panel. Do you want to talk further? Let's jump on a Zoom call. And then I also run a podcast where I interview other authors. And so I always offer them a spot on my podcast following that event as well. But if you don't have that list of emails already readily available, most of the time there's a event brochure that lists the names of the people who were featured on the event with you. And that's what I go through after the event. and I look up their social media pages, I look up their websites, I look up contact forms, and that's when I reach out to them and I'm like, hey, it's me from that thing. Would you like to connect further? Would you like to be on my podcast? Do you want to get on a Zoom? So on and so forth.
I love that. I love that. And then you also leverage some of the assets like the videos and that sort of thing. Is that something that you just have to follow up with the conference and say, hey, can I have, a link to it or embed it on my website?
Yeah, sometimes it's readily available. Sometimes you have to go searching. There's usually some sort of hashtag stream after any event on any major social media platform. So also go through those hashtags to see what the user experience, the attendee experience was like, comment, engage with them, that kind of stuff. I've made it a habit to always make sure that I get pictures of videos of me speaking at the event on my actual phone because I can't rely on other people to do that for me. It's always a good tip to have a friend in the audience doing that for you so that your attention isn't divided between doing the engagement and catching that type of media asset stuff. And so you just have to be aware of where those opportunities are for capturing you walking the walk as well as talking the talk in your area of expertise.
I love that. I love that. So you just gave me another segue to your podcast. And so I love that you're leveraging those relationships of meeting new people and bringing them on your show. Now your show, you basically have a very high bar to be a guest on your show, and that's, perfectly fine. But it's like I love that. So can you tell us a little bit about your podcast and like who's your ideal guest, and so tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, again, it's been a long-term strategy for me. So when I first initially started this podcast back in 2022, I interviewed primarily business owners. That's just the bar that I set for the people. It's called an interviewing visionaries podcast is the overall theme. And so I was interviewing people in my business network who I considered to be visionaries, people who had a strong vision for what the work they were doing in the world could do. And so that was season 1 of the Interviewing Visionaries podcast. Once I went into the publishing space specifically, then I started interviewing specifically authors just generally in my network, which there's a lot of in the business networking as well. As you know, you do a lot of business books. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't really have a high bar for that. But then when I was considering season 3 of the podcast, that's when I upped the ante and was like, all right, I need to strategically start curating the types of people that I want to be talking to and the types of people that I want to be in the room with. And so that's where I started looking for people who had demonstrable success in their author careers. And so typically that means thousands of reviews online or some sort of like, I look for lots of social media followers. Like I'm talking tens of thousands of followers. I'm talking about thousands of reviews. Someone who has a more experienced approach to the writing career, because we specifically talk about marketing in the 3rd season. And when it comes to marketing, that's the most common question that I get from people who are looking to enter into the writing career space. And so I wanted to make sure that the quality of advice was heightened in order to make sure that the experience was also better for my audiences.
I love that. I love that. And your podcast sounds awesome. And I'm looking forward to listening to some of the episodes. And I have to ask you, since you're talking with different levels of authors and you're talking specifically about marketing, is there kind of like a common theme that you kind of see coming through, that like it doesn't matter, maybe it could be to all people, self-publishing people, traditional publishing, hybrid publishing? What's sort of the marketing like go-to problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a dual approach is like, one, you have to know your audiences. Like you have to know their vocabulary, you have to know their fears, their desires, their goals, the whole psyche of your audience. But you also have to understand you and your skill set and your preferences as well. Because if you are forcing yourself to engage with a marketing method that feels uncomfortable for you, then that is going to come across in your marketing content as well. And so there has to be that marriage between those two of like, okay, so my audiences do like video content and I do like producing video content. So therefore, my marketing strategies are going to focus in the video realm, whereas other people may be more inclined towards long blog posts and long thought opinion pieces, and their audiences prefer reading long blog posts and long opinion pieces. And so then you want to focus your marketing efforts in that realm. And so it's really that marriage between understanding both of those players in the marketing realm.
Totally makes sense. And so would you say that even if somebody's working with a traditional publisher, they still have to take on the marketing? Some of the marketing?
Yes, they have to. That's one of the biggest myths about traditional publishing is that they will do all the marketing for you, and that is patently false.
Right. They expect you to do it. Like that's why so many times I'll tell people they're like, I just want to go with a traditional publisher so that way they take care of all of the stuff for me and I just give them my book. And it's like, no, they want your platform. They want your author platform if you're even going to make it into the traditional publishing world. And they're still going to expect you to do stuff. So it's like,
yeah, and they might even not give you like the correct tools to market yourself too. That's the problem. Even if you are willing to market yourself and do the work to market yourself, the publisher may not even give you the tools to succeed in that. They may not give you the copies of the book. They may not give you the marketing like images. They may not even give you like the names of events to go to. So it's you can't depend on them is the moral of the story.
I love that. That's great. So this is a special week for you. So we're actually we're going to be posting this, of course, this recording, in a couple of weeks. And so but this is a special week for Claire. So Claire, can you tell us what's going on special for you this week?
Yeah, it's launch week. So I launch every year on Halloween. And so my fourth book is coming out on Friday, which is 3 days from now.
Wow.
And I'm doing my launch party on November 15th as well. And so I have been in full on launch mode for 2 months, and I probably have 2 more months to go before I'm out of this launch mode because I'm also writing a marketing book right now.
Oh,
And
wow.
so once I'm done with the current promotional content that I'm doing for my fiction series that's releasing this week, I'm going to transition into promotional content for the marketing book that I'm writing.
I love that. That's great. And obviously you've got great marketing tips and you've been picking them up yourself and you've been talking with all sorts of different people about marketing. So that is brilliant. That's brilliant. I have to ask you though, Halloween, like you said that is your, like, is it just because I'll remember it or are you big Halloween buff or just don't.
It's more the former than the latter. I wrote, published, and started selling my first book, my debut novel, in under 9 months in 2022. And so when I was looking at my release timeline back in that year, I knew I was going to do an October release, somewhere around October. And so I just arbitrarily chose Halloween because it was easy to remember.
I love it. So you have to tell us what's the name of your book and what's your book about. I know it's fiction, so tell us the title and what it's about.
Yeah, I'm writing a fantasy series. So the series is named Threads of Destiny. Book 4 is titled To Reap What Is Sown. And so each book follows a different magic wielder in this high fantasy world that I've built. For book 4, the heroine wields plant magic. And so she is grappling with the revelation that we saw at the end of book 3 of her memories being restored. She had amnesia for about 5 years. And once all of her memories returned, she realized that she had unintentionally left all of her loved ones behind and basically forged a new life in this new part of the world without realizing how much she had left behind in her old life. And so book 4 is her returning to her old life and grappling with this sense of abandonment and betrayal and lots of valid anger at being put into this position by the enemies that we see pop up in book 4. And so it is the only tragedy in the series so far, and it breaks a lot of expectations that I've built up so far as the series have been progressing. So
wow,
I'm
fascinating.
I'm really excited to see how readers react to it. My beta readers loved the new direction, and so I'm hoping that continues.
I love that. I love that. So anybody interested in your book, they should get on it and start reading the prior ones so that they have the backstory first and they know everything that's going on. So that's great. That's great. So, okay. So we've come to the end of our time together today, Claire. Thank you so much for sharing so many great tips and advice. And I think we all now have a long laundry list of homework. I hope you're going to bring these panels into your book, because your marketing book, because
yes,
this is a brilliant way to market yourself, market your business, market your book. I love it. I love it. It's great.
Yes. And speaking is a key part of me marketing my marketing book as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Claire. Thank you for everybody who joined us today. And we will see you guys all next time. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful if you could leave us a review. It helps other aspiring authors discover our podcast. To learn more about writing, publishing, and leveraging your business book, visit my website at easypeasybooks.com.